I think it's so unlikely that you would default and give up your position as senior reserve currency in the world, and all the implications of that. When the military, people don't talk about the military in the US, whether you're talking about people of huge campaign donors, you're talking about people that are very wealthy, you're talking about the press, the media. There's no way at the crux that one side would not be forced to compromise with the other. So I think the market understood that. And we talked a little bit earlier about the Treasury bills moving out a little bit at the front end, and I think that's people like myself and other people switching out of Treasury debt short term and putting it into euros and hedging with FX.
Are we making too much of the debt debate, the default debate in the US?
Absolutely, making too much of it. The US government, according to its own numbers, which by any measure are bound to be wrong, has over $110 trillion of Medicare, social Medicare bills before Obamacare. That's obviously been paid off over a long period of time, 20 or 30 years. That's roughly $1 million per 120 million working Americans, if they were all working, and not all of them are. So at some point, that bill will not be payable. Now, what a lot of sell-side economists keep telling us is look at Great Britain post-World War II, look at US post-World War II, where they had a lot of debt to GDP. They inflated it away, and by having low interest rates and higher inflation, which sounds very familiar to now. But what they don't realize is that off-balance sheet debt, the medical and social, whatever, are implicitly linked to inflation. You have to pay someone to look after the elderly. You have to pay for drugs. So every time you reduce the current debt by 2%, the 17 trillion by 2% in inflation, you're inflating the 110 trillion by 2%. So you're becoming in a situation where it gets that current. And what's happened every decade, the politicians have kicked it down the road, and that 20 trillions become 30, become 40, become 110. And at some point, those payments do come due, and what would be 6 or 7% due on 110 trillion might become 6 or 7% due each year on 200 trillion, at which point your interest on that off-balance sheet is a bigger number. So I think the people are focused on this issue.
Maybe we're being a bit too short-term then, are we?
And not focused on the big issue, which is there's too much debt globally. There is not enough assets, there's not enough growth to pay, and sooner or later we're going to have to default on our pensioners, on our voters, on our health services, or on our foreign creditors. We're going to have to make that choice or a bit of both.